This week, we air a pre-recorded interview with Vanessa Van Edwards, lead investigator at Science of People, to discuss leadership characteristics and skills. In the Leadership and Communication segment, how our brains decide when to trust, Warren Buffett's two-list strategy, lack of IT leadership fuels IoT trial failures, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Security can't solve crucial problems when they have to wade through thousands of alerts a day. With ServiceNow, you can easily prioritize and respond to your most crucial business threats. That way you can go from overwhelmed to under control. ServiceNow brings security, risk, and IT together on one platform. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ServiceNow. These days, it's rarely a case of if you'll be hacked and more of a question of when. Once the attacker has passed your defenses, they cover their tracks and systematically infiltrate your network to steal information or shut your business down. You need to rethink the way security is delivered for your digitally transformed business. And there's one security solution that delivers it all: NetScout. Get visibility without borders for consistent detection, mitigation, and prevention across any network, data center, cloud, 5G, and more. Learn more at securityweekly.com/NetScout. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 139, recorded August 12th, 2019. I am your host, Matt Alderman, back from Vegas in Colorado. But joining me from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island is my co-host, Jason Albuquerque, who just landed this morning from Las Vegas.
Hey, Matt, how you doing? Caught the red eye. I'm back and in the studio, baby.
Yeah, I just need to keep you awake long enough to finish this segment.
That's all right. I got my coffee right here. I'm good.
We have exciting news about the Security Weekly webcast program. We are now partnered with ISC Squared as an official CPE provider. If you attend any of our webcasts, you'll be receiving 1 CPE credit per webcast. Register for our upcoming webcast with Signal Sciences by going to securityweekly.com/webcasts. If you have missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them in our on-demand library at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, let's do some articles. Crazy last couple weeks. We did a show 2 weeks ago. Last week was summer camp.
That's right.
I think, you were there, 10 days, something like that?
I was there 10 days, yeah. I went for Black Hat training 4 days in advance, then for the Black Hat conference, and I went right into DEF CON.
Right, and then you flew home last night on the red eye.
That's right.
Just to get here. Paul's at home resting, actually taking care of Shannon and the kids because he was gone for a few days.
That's right. It's been a crazy few weeks.
It has been. So let's get into articles. The first article I pulled up is an interview with Simon McNamara, who's the Chief Administrative Officer at Royal Bank of Scotland. And the reason I actually highlighted this article for this week is I was at Royal Bank of Scotland as a vendor right after this incident had happened. So Simon was brought in 2013 after an outage in 2012 that impacted like 6.5 million customers.
Right.
And the reason I remember this meeting so well is we're with the Royal Bank of Scotland folks. I was with RSA at the time, and we were talking about security and criticality, resilience, etc. I was running strategy for the Archer team, and I distinctly remember them. We were talking about logs and a bunch of other things, and they looked at me and they said, "Look, an IT outage to us is just as bad, if not worse, than a security outage.
Right.
At the end of the day, I'm impacting my customers. And sometimes in security, we always think about the security incident, the security-based outage. And so, security logs and all this other stuff are important. But because RBS had just gone through this process, just had this outage, they're like, look, I want to know if my machines are out of memory, out of CPU, out of disk space, out of whatever. I got a hardware failure coming because that created this outage. Simon comes in really to help address aspects of that outage. And there's just this interview is really great if you want to see how other leaders think and some of the process they go through. A really interesting article.
Yeah, no, it was great. And number one, I mean, it's interesting his role, right? His role as chief administrative officer is technology, operations, third-party vendor, data, property, supply chain. I mean, it almost reminds me of a chief operations officer, right? I mean, it's kind of in line with that, but heavily focused on the technology and innovation side. And the article was great because when he walked in the door, obviously, I mean, I'm sure the outage played a big role in this, but one of the big things was that he walked into a culture that was 100% supportive. And as a leader, that's huge. Having the board and the executives on your team, supporting your agenda, supporting what you're coming in to do for the company, it's a big deal. And he talks about how in the beginning he felt that support right out of the gate.
It probably didn't hurt that they got a fine for the outage, and therefore it kind of bubbled this up to the higher level executive staff to go, look, we've got to get our arms around this and we can't let this happen again, which created probably that cultural buy-in right from the get-go. But yeah, you're right. He definitely had the support of the rest of the executive leadership.
Yeah. And the good part is that they were forward-thinking too, right? I mean, they talked about a Gartner study that estimated, 80% of traditional banks would go out of business by 2030. And they said, how are we going to make a difference? How are we going to differentiate ourselves? And they realized that technology was a huge piece of that, right? To be able to innovate with technology using innovative partners. So the partnerships that they surrounded themselves with, I mean, which is great because he owned supply chain as well. So he could have that leadership insight into bringing the right partners in to align with his innovation strategy. So I think it was a good combination of skills within that role and in ownership within that role to be able to do these innovative things for the bank.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he went through a series of kind of strategic thought process, right? And it talks about his four major key areas of resilience, simplification, efficiency, and innovation. Obviously, resilience was the first piece because they had just had the outage. Really wanted to get his arms around that one.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, from a technology perspective and a security perspective, right? All-encompassing.
Yep, exactly. And then simplification. This is where the partners come in. Right, by simplifying certain aspects of the supply chain, leveraging key partners better to simplify the third-party interactions to keep that supply chain really tight. Then creating efficiencies, not only internally, but externally with those partners. And I've got an article in here tied to effectiveness versus efficiency in a little bit that ties into this whole theme from Simon. And then his last one was innovation. They've done some really innovative things over the past few years to really make themselves relevant in the banking industry.
Yeah, and I think that combination of those four areas, they play on each other, right? Because with the simplification and efficiency, you realize economies of scale, you save money. Now you can start funneling that money into innovation, right? So they all play into each other as a strategy.
Exactly right. So anybody who wants to really understand what kind of a nice approach to really think about how do you not only develop your technology strategy, but your supply chain and your security challenges. Really great read. Some really good points in here for anybody who wants to understand kind of how Simon did it over at RBS. My next article, we've covered this before, but not as succinct as this. And this is Warren Buffett's two-list strategy. It's a 3-step process, really simple. And most people, when they first hear it, they're like, wait a minute.
I know.
But this is how he does it. And I love this, right? Step 1, your top 25 goals, your career goals, write them down on a list, right? So you take the time, you write down your top 25 career goals of what you want to do, where you want to be. Step 2, circle the top 5. Then take the other 20 and basically throw them away.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the story starts out with, the story of Mike Flint, and it's basically Warren Buffett's pilot for 10 years, right? And they're having conversations around career priorities and things of that nature. Normal things you would do with your boss, right? With your leader. You'd have these conversations. And they were having a conversation around how do you better prioritize. And it's funny because reading this article, it reminded me of a strategy that I was actually, I went through a certification that's called the 4 Disciplines of Execution. Franklin Covey wrote a book, 40X, and it was very interesting to me because it's along those same ideas, right? You have to have discipline focus, right? You have to act on lead measures and things that are going to have high impact. And then, you have to really have a cadence of accountability to focus on them, right, within the 40X structure. So it's very, very similar to that. And it's something that I've used throughout my career to be able to focus on innovation and projects and making sure that we're getting projects out the door. But then there's this whole concept of the whirlwind, right? And that's those 25 or the 20, right? Those are the 20 that come out of the 25 is that daily whirlwind where you have to kind of put it aside, right? And you have to put that focus on your top 5 priorities and really focus on them. Then you can start bringing other projects in as you start completing those top priorities.
Yeah, and the point that I think he's really trying to make here is you need a way to prioritize your daily activities and your goals, and then you have to minimize distractions. And those other 20 things that you want to do are distractions until you finish the first 5.
That's right.
So focus on the first 5, throw the other 20 away.
Yeah.
Now, when you complete those 5, then you go back and you do the process again.
That's right.
So you do your top 25, you pick your 5, you throw the 20 away, and that's what keeps you focused on your priorities and you minimize distractions along the way.
And there was a sentence in that I really like. It says, eliminate ruthlessly, force yourself to focus, and complete a task or kill it, right? And it goes through and it says the most dangerous distractions are the one you love, but that don't love you back, right? So you have to take those ones that really aren't going to bring value back to you and push them aside. Even though you love the project and you may have a passion for it, sometimes you're going to put them aside for the greater good, right?
Yep, exactly. Next article, part 3 of our trust series. There's still 2 more in this series. I did not forget about them, even though I was at Black Hat last week and probably forgot about a whole bunch of stuff. But this one is how our brains determine how to trust. And this talks about the physiology of the brain and how it works and gets into a couple interesting nuances. So there's 2 parts of the brain, right? One from a thinking perspective, the other one more from a empathy feeling perspective. And it's a combination of those 2 things in your brain that allow you, as you're having interactions with people, to determine, do I trust this person? Why should I trust this person, etc. And it's that combination.
Right.
And what the article talks about is that happens on both sides. So you're doing that as well as the other person's doing that. And that is what allows us to either decide to trust or not trust. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that first piece of it, the theory of the mind, they called it, right? It's really where we have our insight, our planning, our abstract thought. And it allows us to, when we're interacting in a relationship, to say, if I were that person, I would do X, Y, Z, right? So that every time you're working with someone and you're kind of thinking what I would do if I were them, that's that side of the brain, right? And the other side is the emotional piece, like you had mentioned, the empathy side. And in combination, that's where that trust factor builds. And we've talked about this on the show a lot. Trust is the foundation of every relationship, right? Every relationship, whether it's a personal relationship, a business relationship, it's really that foundational piece that's going to allow you to have a good working relationship with folks.
Exactly. And so this gets really interesting. Now when you understand the thinking and the feeling part of what the brain does, then you bring in leaders and leadership, and you get some interesting nuances that impact this trust thing. And this article points out 2 very important things around fear and domination. And the first one is fear. A leader can instill fear into somebody in the short term, but long term it doesn't work. And the example they give here is, look, getting close to a deadline. But we had some deadlines last week with Black Hat, right? Crazy schedule for us. And there were certain things we had to get done before we got there. Not that I implored fear, but activities like that where you're under a deadline, some leaders will use fear as a way to motivate the employees to finish it.
Yeah.
But the article says you can do that for short term, but if you try to do it for long term, you're actually going to damage your relationship and the trust with your staff.
Absolutely.
So use it sparingly.
Yeah, and see, I look at it in different ways, right? There's the fear factor, but there's a sense of urgency factor. I like to take the sense of urgency, right? Because it's not fear. It's working with your staff, your employees, your colleagues, your peers to say, we have a deadline to get to, right? We have to complete this task by a certain time frame. We have to have a higher sense of urgency. Otherwise, we're not going to meet our goals. How do we collectively get together and do that, right? Now, is there a sense of fear that you're not going to achieve that goal? Sure. But you're not using the fear factor, right? You're not using the strong side of fear. You're using the sense of urgency piece of it. That's where I find you get better success. Because people will rally. We're humans. We want to complete those goals. We want to be successful, right? So you're going to rally around that sense of urgency.
Yeah. The second one they talk about here is the dominant behavior. Where you are dominant over people and always putting them down, which is very, very destructive in building trust. And I've seen leaders like this, right? I've seen leaders that use this dominant style. I'm the best. I'm going to put everybody down and kind of keep that kind of really alpha dominance over the team. But psychologically, that's hurting your employees because of that empathy component, right? If they're always put down, they're always mistreated, that empathy side of the equation, and then the other side kicks in, you're going to destroy the trust relationship with the leaders. And I think it's very dangerous for leaders to constantly try to dominate over top of their employees. And that's why we get turnover. That's why people leave.
Right. And it's a slippery slope, right? Because not only do you start losing trust, you start losing morale. And you start losing morale, you start losing productivity. You start losing productivity, you start losing the relationships between all the staff on your teams, right? So it's a slippery slope. It just has a snowball effect that's going to happen.
It does. They talk about doing some internal surveys and stuff. People can read that later.
Yep.
I thought it was interesting to talk about kind of the aspects of how our brain operates and then how fear and dominance from a leadership perspective actually deteriorates that trust relationship.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Efficiency versus effectiveness. A fantastic article.
Absolutely. This is a great article.
Because we talk a lot about operational efficiency. Right. And as we think about security and kind of where security is going, we think about things like security orchestration and automation. But the article says, well, if your processes aren't effective, then you're just automating ineffective processes, which doesn't necessarily make you efficient.
That's right. Some leaders use technology as a crutch instead of looking at it holistically, right? Because if you truly want efficiency gains, you're going to look at the people, the processes, and the technology. You're going to align the right technology to the people and the processes, right? It goes into the article talking about business process mapping, Six Sigma side, right? My entire career, I did Lean BPM. So I got certified in Lean BPM. I used to do it throughout the organization, literally sit with all different business units and say, let's pick a task that you want to gain efficiencies in, right? A process that you want to gain efficiencies in. Let's get all the stakeholders in a room. And we called it low tech, high touch. We would literally take a big piece of paper, put it on a wall, or we'd have it on a whiteboard, and we'd sticky note with swim lanes with all the different stakeholders that are involved and go through the entire process, task by task by task. And we would mark them, which ones add value and which ones do we think do not add value to the organization. So we would know right away that this is value add, this is not value add. And as you start going through the process, you focus on the non-value add, and that's where you start the automation, right? You start looking at what technologies can I bring in, or what can I change in the process to flip this to a value-added process within this entire process map.
So too bad Paul's not on this episode, because this is exactly what we're doing at Security Weekly.
Yep.
Right? If we think about it, do I want to be more operationally efficient? Absolutely.
Yep.
But the first thing we had to do was go through and make our processes more effective.
That's right.
So a lot of the work we've done on the front end of our process is to the point where we've got the right level of automation in the front side, what I call the front office, the sales and marketing piece of the business. And we leverage tools like HubSpot to really make us efficient doing that. Now we're working on the opposite end, which is our production side. This is where Paul's been spending a lot of his time since I've come on board, is improving the effectiveness of what we do post-production and now getting our software to start to automate tasks of that.
That's right.
Because we know where the efficiency gains are now that we're better aligned on what is effective in our process,
That's
right? How do we publish? Where
That's
do
the
we
key.
publish? How do we notify social media, the guests, etc.? We do a lot of that manually today.
right.
We are not highly efficient in that at all. But as the software gets there, we're taking what we believe to be effective, now making it
That's
more
right.
efficient. Now the rest of the team can start to work on some of the other things that we want to do.
You have visibility into the operational process, the structure, the standard operating procedures that you have within the organization. You know what's going to fit this organization from a process perspective. Now you can take that technology and you can align it to that. Now you're solving business problems, right? A lot of organizations have trouble with adoption. Adoption rates of technologies are low, 20% in many instances. If you ever want to get that adoption rate higher, you have to go through the process mapping exercise. You have to understand your process first.
Yeah.
Right. And then adjust from there or add technology from there.
Right. And where's the priorities, right? We prioritized the front end of the process first, late last year into early this year. Now we're putting priority on the back end of the process when it comes to publishing, because that from a workload is our highest task, right? We're publishing 16 segments a week. We're distributing content to all these places. That's where the bulk of our work is. I still have a tie-in in the middle and making it easier for my sponsors and other people to participate in the process. And I need to streamline that over time. That'll come next as we continue to map out where our priorities are.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. For IT and or security leaders who want to understand the business better, look into business process mapping, right? It's a great skill to bring to the stakeholders and other business units where you can sit down with them and help, number one, make their processes more efficient. And number two, you're learning the business so you can find ways as you're mapping out that process. Oh, we need DLP here, or we need some type of security technology there, or we need some type of security visibility in this side of the process. It starts bubbling up important pieces of the process that gives you visibility into where sensitive data may live or sensitive processes may exist.
Exactly. And integrations with third parties.
Yep,
and
100%.
Where those touch points are and what data is going there and all the other things.
It's amazing how it can bubble up shadow IT as well.
Better than a port scan.
Yeah, absolutely.
This last article is interesting, right? We hear all the buzz around IoT, the Internet of Things, and how this is the future. So Microsoft goes out and does a survey to see what's happening with IoT projects. And the numbers are pretty staggering. I summarized the number in my show notes.
Yeah.
Only 7% experienced no failures in their proof of concept. Only 7%. Now that's really
insane.
low.
Yeah, that's insane.
32% had low rate of failure, 31% had moderate failure rates, and 30% said between half and all of their proof of concept projects had failed.
Yep. Yeah, and I think this article, some of this ties into the previous article, right? I think some organizations didn't understand the business problem that they needed to solve, number one. And number two, they weren't bringing in stakeholders early on in the proof of concept. Is this actually going to solve a business problem for us? You could have stakeholders saying, wait a minute, we don't need this. You're going the totally wrong direction. You could have killed it right in the beginning and moved to a different direction, right? Taking it to a whole new side of the business. But those are two key parts. Understand the problem you're trying to solve or the non-value add processes you're trying to fix, and get the leadership involved right away, because they could tell you right out of the gate you're going in the wrong direction for the organization. You need to focus somewhere else.
Exactly. And I think that's the point of the article, is that because it's hot technology, a proof of concept for the sake of a proof of concept is why these projects fail.
That's right.
There has to be decision maker buy-in. There has to be business value to implementing these technologies in order for the business to rally around them and make those investments, because it talks about, not getting the ROI or the misalignment on budget or business goals. That's what's causing these projects to fail.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have that decision maker buy-in early on and the business value around it, you're wasting a lot of time.
Absolutely. Our organization talks about that all the time. At Carousel, we say we don't want to focus on bad busy. And bad busy is creating a project and or an initiative that isn't solving a business problem or doesn't have complete stakeholder buy-in. Because if you're not out of the gate thinking about, number one, the outcome first, chances are you're working in the bad busy. And that's not going to add value to the organization. It's not going to add value to our clients. We're just burning cycles for the sake of burning cycles.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing it ourselves, right? This is why we've got the new website, but we're not quite ready to release. It's why eventually we want to do a mobile app. But I can't do that until all these other pieces are in and where I can show where we can provide value to our listeners. And so, yeah, I'd love a mobile app.
Sure.
But without having some of this other foundational stuff done, going after a mobile app right now it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be living in the world of instant gratification, right? I mean, there's a saying that I've brought to every single one of my teams and had it in our boardrooms and our meeting rooms. And it's the reason why people fail instead of succeed is they trade what they want most for what they want in the moment. Yeah, that mobile app would be great in the moment, make you feel good, nice new blinky light, but it's not taking you to the end game. It's just not going to do it right away, right? You have to pick the right time to implement that and throw that in the mix.
Exactly. It's a conversation Paul and I have a lot when we look at different aspects of the business.
Yeah. And eventually it'll come, right? You have to build the foundation. You have to build the road to get you to the outcome where you want to go. And at some point, it's going to be the right time to drop that mobile app. The listeners are going to be happy. The customers are going to be happy. The employees are going to be happy because now they can interface in a different way. But if you launch that too soon, you're not going to get that adoption rate that we're looking for.
Yep. Effectiveness, then efficiency.
You got it.
Buy-in, business value, make it go.
You got it.
Jason, thank you so much for joining me. I know you're on short sleep, but
it's all good. I'll go take a nap after. It's all good. It's worth coming in.
Awesome. We're going to take a quick break, but join us for our pre-recorded interview with Vanessa Van Edwards from Science of People. It's an awesome interview. You don't want to miss it.